All right. So my guest today is Dr. Gordon Chiu, and we just got done with just such an engaging, thought-provoking conversation. We covered everything from homeschooling to choices of commercial real estate to inventions to the state of the world and where we would stand in the next 30 years if things continue to happen at this point. His prediction of a virus event or a invisible enemy that he made 10 years ago when he was working on H1N1. You're just going to super enjoy this, and just a little bit more about Dr. Chiu. He's a scientist, teacher, inventor, and author. He's done extensive work on the subject of viruses over the last decade, and his knowledge and guidance has helped save many lives. He's a disciple of the financial independence, retire early movement FIRE. He's modified FIRE so that his investments improve his clarity as an investor, and he's accomplished over 8 figures in real estate holdings. What it doesn't mention is that that's in less than 2 years. He actively tutors biology, chemistry, physics, math, and ACT, SET, and believes training his students becoming knowledgeable through impeccable thoroughness, and understanding mathematics and allows proper calculations to discover new planets, which is one of the talk tracks today of how we're going to solve just a growing population. He's born and raised in New York, went over to New Jersey. He's graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, summa cum laude in chemistry, a master's in chemistry, working full-time in Merck. He traded an opportunity for a multi-year program at Columbia University for a 3-semester program at Seton Hall because he didn't want to drive over the bridge and pay those tolls. And 4 years later, got 2 scholarships and formally completed a doctoral degree in natural medicine and a doctorate in business. And right after school, Gordon was chosen as doctor for numerous skincare brands, including and representing Demi Moore's skincare event in Asia. And he also has a young family, a wife and 2 daughters that are under the age of 5. And if that's not enough, let's start here. He's a prolific inventor. He has 31 filed patents during his tenure in the corporate world. Ultimately, though, he decided to ditch the trappings of corporate America in order to spend more time teaching and motivating the youth, which we covered a lot today, why that is so paramount in where we're going forward. So you're just going to really highly enjoy this. Welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have Dr. Gordon Chiu. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. We're very excited today. We have Dr. Chiu on the show. Hey, doctor, how you doing?
Hey, Jason. I'm good.
Good. Well, I have been excited to speak with you for quite a while. You know, we met, we had breakfast at one time, and we had quite an engaging talk. And sometimes when you have those talks, you notice there's not enough time in the day for the talk, right? Because we were talking on a lot of topics, and I felt like we could really go forever, and that's always great. So I was excited to have you come on the podcast and just chat, because you've accomplished so many different things in so many different areas, and it's always curious for me to see people that are doing things that are helpful and outside the box. And growing up, as you grew up, was this something that was part of your upbringing? Was your family always pushing you to look at things from a different angle, or to experiment, or is there something that always was curious to you, that you always were looking at something and trying to figure it out? Was this something that always spawned you, or did it happen at a certain point later in time?
I'm actually trying to trace that myself, to try to create that environment for my kids. Exactly what is that magic moment. And my conclusion to date is that, so this could change if I discover that it was one magic moment, but I firmly believe it's multiple magic moments, and you really require many mentors. So it's not just 1 + 1. It's really, if you had 50 mentors along the way under different circumstances, and you then learned how to react to those situations, that would become, and there's different grades of these mentors, but you then create this picture of what the threats are, what the risks are, what the rewards are. And it's almost like playing a Monopoly game. And initially when you play the Monopoly game, you want to win, right? So that's the idea, is to win. But what if I told you that winning the game was actually supposedly being the best player that made everyone feel good, right? So the goal of winning would be to play for 50 hours of one game Monopoly. Now, however you're going to accomplish that, right? It's either, I guess, when you pass go and you collect people's money, you pay them back so that they can continue to feel good and they don't really know about it, right? That would be the ultimate in the winning, because that's your goal. If I told you that that was your goal, instead of beating everyone else, then you'd approach it completely different, right? So I learned from multiple mentors, and sometimes they weren't mentoring me particularly on this topic, but it was that they had their dreams taken away. They were working on something really important, like figuring out how the battery worked that would power the future. But then their finances got cut off. So they were done. They were so brilliant. We're talking about the #1 scientists in the world historically. These are like the Einsteins of that particular topic. And then as they reached a certain point, the rug got pulled underneath them. I mean, that's pretty dramatic, right? So when I say the rug, is there's this big bad person, their boss or something that does this? No, it's actually nothing like what you imagine. It's either like life gets to them, family issues, or their health gets to them. It's just time to go. An accident happens. It's statistically, there's all these things that happen that actually prevent you from having the time to solve the problem. And of course, ultimately, you could also have someone who solves it before you, right? In the world, and now you don't get the Nobel Prize. I've had pictures with people who were to become Nobel laureates, and some of them have become. His name is John Goodenough down in Texas. And then there are people that I took pictures with that were supposed to get the Nobel Prize that didn't, right? So these people were working on various topics, and it's just the luck of the draw, right? In the sense that, so what is the take-home message, right? Be flexible. Make sure if you really like what you're doing and you like certain things about your life and you want to keep it going, what are the risk factors that could prevent that from happening?
Something that stands out about what you're saying here is that the line of unhappiness that we see today can almost be correlated to the lack of people's ability to want to experiment with their life, right? And the one thing that's captivating in science is you're constantly experimenting to see what doesn't work so you can get closer to what does work, and
That's right.
With our lives, we get stuck in a pattern where we're saying, well, I don't want to experiment something different. Even though I'm not happy where I am, I would prefer to just stay there because it's comfortable. And I don't want to try something that I could potentially fail at, but because I can't ideally see what the upside would be, right? But at such an early age, you listen to mentors, and that's something else that stands out. Is like all of us can potentially have people around us that can give us value, but many times we just don't want to listen, right? We want to assume that our way is the way. So what are some of the through lines with your mentors that you heard over and over about the things being taken that were outside their control, that transcended you to be able to take the steps that you did?
Well, at a young age, I classified these characters that were mentors as two different types of animals, if you may. One was the pink pigeon, and the other one is the white lion. So white lions are individuals that come into your life and they're so powerful that they completely obliterate any negativity in your life. I'm talking about if you had debt, they're able to wipe out your debt. If you had failing grades, they're able to transfer you over to a different private school, that kind of thing. They're so powerful. So what white lions are able to do is they can actually wipe out black swan events. I don't need to explain the black swan, but the black swan is some catastrophic event that no one thinks about happens, but the white lion could actually take that out. So mentors, there's different levels. So there's that mentorship and friendship, and they could be investors, it could be various individuals, friends that you never know about, that you grow up together. But their willingness, their bond with you allows that to happen. Then there's the pink pigeon, and the pink pigeon are people who, they just are, when they're around you, you feel better about yourself. They're not able to like take out those bad events, but they make everything, all those heightened levels slightly better. They're supportive, even if they can't help. For example, they come visit you in a hospital, but they're not a doctor. Well, why does that matter? Well, it makes that difference because they have soothing words. Everything about them is they look about life very differently. So in science, the benefit is that mostly everybody looks at life differently. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in science. Usually for a scientist, it's a long road. And we're not talking about a medical doctor. We're talking about someone who's an inventor, who stays the course for the purpose of something greater to leave behind for humanity above and beyond themselves. So discovering a cancer vaccine for breast cancer, a viral vaccine for viruses that cause cancer, discovering drugs that could be isolated from plants as simple as penicillin that came from the cantaloupe. Having that, and I'm talking about Louis Pasteur and people like that, you have got to stay focused in your life while others view you as missing the boat, right? Okay, so those individuals are ultimately very, they're not just positive and optimistic and realistic. They find that the purpose of life is to develop a life with purpose for something as great as humanity. So when you think about, the discrimination, for example, that we have today, that doesn't happen in science. Like, why would you judge someone based on their color of their skin? Because, look, if we make it to another planet, let's say we're going to discover another planet, as long as it's a human being, we're as scientists, we're happy. As long as it's a human being, I don't care if it's a male or a female, because the goal is to get human beings to that next step. See, when you look at risk that way, right? I'll tell you a story. By 2050, if the world population goes from currently 7.8 billion to 10 billion people on the planet, we have to level all the trees in Africa and possibly all the trees in Brazil just to create enough food using today's technology. And the kicker is today's technology to provide enough food for everyone at these prices, right? So there's a lot of clauses in there at these prices. So obviously, if you raise the price, then perhaps the farmer can be sustained and other things, but then that leads to inflation and other things that some people can't afford it. So there are societal ills that will all be solved if we find another planet. Now, how do you get another planet? You can't have rocket ships blasting off carrying 10 individuals, because what happens then, is in order to escape the velocity of the Earth, you got to blast off parts. So you're dropping parts in order to get beyond the gravity, and then you're now landing somewhere in space and you have no way of returning. That's a problem. And there's only 10 of you. So there are all kinds of problems that result from that. So to theorize, why is math important? Why is not algebra or addition, subtraction, division important, but why is calculus important? Because some things cannot be explained using basic math. It just cannot be explained. So when you understand that, then you understand, for example, even real estate, because real estate can be explained with calculus, but with nothing else. So that's really bizarre, in the sense that if you took your science to that level and your mind is now moving at that level, and then I share with you the story of the risks that could happen on this planet, like viruses and things like that, to put us at risk. What are you going to do with your life? Are you going to play that Monopoly game so that you're the one winner and now there's no game anymore? Nobody wants to play with you because the other three individuals don't want to lose. Like, who wants to keep losing? So if you understand that, then you change your mindset as far as what should be changed, why I should be flexible. If you knew that your health could be better if your environment was better, well, how do you get your environment better? Being alone. You have to have a family. If you want your family to be maintained, it takes more than just providing them with resources. You have to watch your words. You have to be careful at how you say things. You have to learn to be someone else's pink pigeon as well as their white lion. So we all can become better, but the realization has to happen early.
Yeah, and the resistance sometimes that there's so much put on blaming others for where we are, where it really just has to start with us. Everybody, all of us have the ability to control, our actions, our thoughts, our feelings, what we say. We all have that ability, and we choose not to, or we choose to, and a change comes. And it's captivating, right? So we get to 10 billion people by 2050. Another planet, okay, that's a logical choice, right? We can now spread. But if you were today sitting there with the direction to go, what would be your thought track? What would be some things that you would start to identify? And you talked about different things with farmers and others. What do we do?
Well, first, if that happened right now, we'd be in trouble. Good thing it's not 2050, it's 2020, right? So how do you in 30 years create a massive change? See, it's not a cyclical event where every peak will have a trough and then it'll just repeat it like a sine curve. That's trigonometry. What it is that it's not going to repeat itself. We are at risk. So the only people can save us, who have the time to save us and the drive to save us, is the next generation. It's the next generation of children that you got to tell them. You got to tell them this. If you don't tell them this, then why would they choose to go into aeronautical engineering, right? Aerospace engineering. Why would they do that? The amount of calculus and math that they have to take on is just tremendous. It's gigantic. If you told them that when you charge up your batteries, that 20% of your lithium is gone. We don't know why that's the case, but it's been that way since the 70s when we invented lithium batteries. Oh, that explains why your phone batteries don't last so long and your other things. Would you still buy an electric vehicle? You may, right? We buy things that deteriorate, but you have to be totally informed. Do you want to solve it? Would you like to? Did you know that there's 5 types of viruses that can cause hepatitis? A, B, C, D, and E. Most people look, there's Hep A, there's Hep B, but they don't know about, and they might know about Hep C, but they don't know about hepatitis E or D. And you actually need B in order to get D. So, that's really interesting. So, that virus understanding, right? Like the COVID-19, you asked me some questions about that, because of my background. Well, imagine if I chose not to work on the H1N1 virus back in 2009. What would happen? Right now, I would not have any idea about viruses from the frontline perspective. Right? I just wouldn't. And then what would have happened? It would have changed the type of real estate I ended up buying.
Where do we go with COVID-19 right now? Because like you brought that up, and the hardest thing is that if you're just a person who's getting your feedback for what you hope is a trusted source to news, from one day to the next, you don't know where to go. One day mask, next day no mask, next day mask, next day mask, wear them but they're pointless. Next day mask, sometimes next day you can go around your family. Next day don't go around your family, and next day there could be a sudden reaction. It's hard for a person that doesn't have frontline experience or know how to look at the data or understand the data to really identify, what do I do? What are the precautions I really need to take, and what could I do logically to continue to move forward in some capacity?
Okay, so let's look at it this way too, so we don't forget the need for these children, right? So we know that every country needs to have a military, right? And we have boot camps to train our military, and as a consequence, we feel protected. Police force, same thing. We have a training camp. We qualify people and we maintain them. We send taxpayers' money to maintain them. So without that maintenance, how many police officers would continue to be police officers? How many military personnel would no longer be? People who work in the national forestry, they might no longer work in the national forest. And when you go to national parks, there's nobody there. So, so you need to maintain these things. Well, on a science level, we don't maintain our scientists. So when you have a child that becomes curious and wants to work on something science, what you do is, as a parent that perhaps doesn't have, and all parents, by the way, don't have the same basis usually as their children. So what happens is you're looking at this and saying, this is foreign to me. So then that whole change, are you willing to accept change? Are you willing to support them? to the very end, not just giving them some summer camp thing, or to support them at the very end, meaning they might need resources, they might need positive thinking, words. You might have to hire some people to inspire them, because it's hard to stay motivated on that when you're, the majority of people don't, right? So that's the environment you're faced with, right? So these if you prize them, these scientists who could solve the problem quicker, if you don't have them when the crisis occurs, now you have an issue where, let's make scientists. We can't just pull them off of shelf. It takes decades to have that, and they're on maintenance. It's like the wizard in the game, right? The wizard doesn't have any armor, gets killed in the front line. You can't put the wizard in the front line, right? So that understanding, that kind of thinking, right, is I think that the society has forgotten what kinds of risks there are when you don't maintain that. And everyone's thinking someone's maintaining, there'll always be scientists around. So that's the thing, is that when you start having that risk factor, and then you have the issues come about, you only have so many scientists. Now it's easy to think that as long as we now have scientists, we're okay. Scientists are highly distracted to shiny objects, right? So the shiny object for the scientists is exactly this, is that if I work on mobile gaming, or if I work on graphene, something I worked on, or if I worked on the H1N1, I could be famous or not. But I'm going to gravitate to the thing that most people are talking about right now. So the next generation of scientists might work on COVID-19 to better understand it, to elucidate the mechanism. And then I guarantee you the next thing that will come about in 10 years will not be anything like COVID-19. Will not be, just like H1N1, when I was in that documentary and I mentioned in 10 years we're going to have another outbreak, but it won't be the same as this one. How did I know with such great certainty? Guaranteed, right? And that's my reputation on the line. I'm in this thing. It's because of math, right? So when we're looking for the blue book, and we're constantly looking for the blue book, so any blue book, we got to burn them. But what if it's not a blue book and it turns out to be a red book? Or if it's not even a book, it's red, but it's something else. See, our minds become so focused on the temperature from the SARS virus, the temperature from the H1N1 virus, and that leads to infection. Well, COVID-19, the coronavirus, had no symptoms, right? But they were still infectious. And so I classified this in that documentary as the invisible enemy. If the enemy is invisible, how do you quite know? How do you quite know what they look like? But in general speak, right, you have an invisible enemy. And those shiny objects I just described as scientists being distracted, don't think of the shiny object as some task or some job or some mission. It might actually be the shiny object of life, where you get distracted. You go to MIT, you get glorified with the title. And then you find out that, hey, I better join a hedge fund or something, because it's that cost. So the inability to maintain that purpose of what you initially started off doing becomes a huge distraction. That becomes your shiny object. I'll give some numbers that everyone can understand. If you took 60 times 60 times 24, that's 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and 24 hours in a day. The number you arrive at is 86,400 seconds in one day. So if I converted that to money, and I said, I'm going to deposit $86,400 in your bank account every day. Every day you get this. Now, half of the monies, over $40,000, will be required for sleep. And whenever you eat, you have to pay this time, right? You have to pay this monies because you have to eat the 3 meals. So you're going to lose at least half that time. And then the other, about $40,000 will come from you having to work, right? You have to go to a job, you're working 8 to 10 hours a day. So you're left with really 2 hours. So if someone makes you upset, so how do we calculate 2 hours? We got to take 60 times 60. And so that's 3,600 times 2. So $7,200 is left in your pocket out of an $86,400 per day deposit. are you then going to take, if someone took, $60 from you, are you going to use, which is a minute of your happiness, right? A minute of your time. Are you now going to take the other $7,000 and go after them, right? Burn it up and go after them, right? Are you going to just chase after something bad that happened? Bad things happen potentially every day, but so do great things, and so do good things. Don't put good money after bad, right? Let it go, right? Let it go.
Seems like so much focus
Yeah.
get pointed on that one pinnacle event that's just it's the bad thing, but that's where all the focus lies.
Right. So how do you get rid of the bad thing, right? How do you not do that? You change your perspective on what it means to have those bad things happen to you. I'll give you another case, right? And then with numbers. There was an expert, and I highly recommend this book. It's a book written by Malcolm Gladwell, and it's the 10,000 hour rule to become a world expert at something. But I want to change your perspective after you read the book, and you can listen to this podcast again. So if you took 24 hours a day and then you multiplied those 24 hours accordingly to 365 days in a year, your number that you would get you get out of that, right? 24 hours times 364, 5 days a year, you'd get a number. But I don't want you to use that number first. I want you to think about, you don't have 24 hours in a day. 8 hours is spent on sleeping. 3 to 4 hours are spent on eating meals, hygiene. So we cut that time in half to make the calculation easier. We never want to take a big number to make a bigger number. So let's just simplify what we need. We only have 12 hours left now, half the time. Now, of half the time, 8 to 10 hours is spent working, right? So you got 10 hours. So basically you have 2 hours left again. So with the 2 hours, if you then multiply by 365 days a year, right, you'd end up getting 730 hours every year to work on. 730 hours to work on becoming a world expert, provided you actually have the determination and the discipline to spend all those 2 hours every day. And your soulmate's not distracting you or something like that. Your family's not distracting. You can completely be left alone, and you're not in the movie theater or something. You're just really focused. If you did that, you'd get 730. Remember, the number is 10,000 according to the book. You'd need 13 to 14 years to achieve target. So how many 13 years do you have in your life to execute that? And we're just going to give you some extra time. So we're going to say in 10 years, it takes you 10 years to become an expert. How many 10 years do you have? Well, do you have it when you're 10 to 20? Do you have it when you're 21 to 30 years old? Do you have it when you're 31 to 40 years old? What time segment? And now with COVID-19, a lot of people have time on their hands, but they're not focused on doing something, right? So the time bleeds away. Now, if you were able to create a very different life, knowing of that, that's so important to become an expert at something and to really be able to connoisseur and know certain things. What type of job do you need to have? Because the job, it's the sleep in the job that really affects the bulk of the time. So if we didn't have to sleep, we'd be okay, but then we wouldn't live very long. So we'd have all kinds of issues. But if perhaps the job, if we could change it and optimize it, and then with the time that's left, we don't kill time, we don't waste time, we make most use of our time, then it would be best, right? Changing one's perspective is really important. Now, that doesn't mean changing everything about your life, because, for example, a happily married couple, if you change and do something where it offends the other person, that puts all your finances at tremendous risk. That puts your entire purpose at tremendous risk. When you get older and you're in the hospital and there's nobody who's endured with you that's going to give you that sip of warm water, you have a dry mouth, your lips are parsed, who are you gonna, that new person doesn't have that relationship. So take care of your relationships, change the negative things, change the risk things, right? The things that create the risk, and generate that ecosystem of, I don't want to call it utopia, but constantly have it on monitor to ensure that you're reducing your risk. And sometimes you might not even advance. You advance just based on the fact that you didn't fall behind. who's, and that could be an advance. And that's really the secret of how I got to, these 8 figures of real estate, in a few years.
Well, and you look at it, I almost look at this gap of time that we've had, in February into March till into May, June, is that this was your chance that you did have the time, but you also had almost a free pass where if you tried something and failed, and no one was going to look hard on you because this time is uncanny time. So why not do it? Right. So, and because a lot of people that may have been more conservative in nature, but even businesses, right? Businesses, they had to take perceived risks during at this time because the entire landscape has changed. Not many times does anybody ever perform for zero revenue. Right. If that's if that's your business and your business is completely service oriented, well, okay, so it's zero revenue. So what can you do at that point? Can you, if you're a restaurant with a large parking lot, can you open up a drive-in movie theater where cars parked, 10 feet apart and, you bring food to them? Can you have some kind of set up a kiosk? What can you do to change a narrative that completely wasn't your business plan before? But if it fails, no one was going to second guess you because everyone was saying, well, you were just trying something in a very uncertain time. And still people went the opposite way. They said, well, I'm just going to sit here in fear and face face it day to day and, watch Netflix and other. And that's why we continue to go further in the direction of not getting to this point of having more scientists or even having more, factory workers, right? I mean, factory workers need to be more skilled today than ever. But it's still that path that is not, it gets talked down to, go do this because you don't want to get stuck in a factory, so that's why we start seeing a lot of our jobs overseas. And it became pretty prevalent here where we saw that we were so reliant on other countries for so much, especially medicine. I mean, that was shocking. I didn't even know that much was reliant, but you think about that. Hopefully this will be an eye opener for at least America to say, you know what? It's time for us to start doing some of these things and maybe COVID, it's something that, my kids are 5, 3, 1, they're asking the questions, is the virus gone today? It's simple things like that they don't understand, but there will be people that will be maybe a couple years older than them, maybe 15, 16, that just says, this is so interesting that I can't quote unquote know what the outcome is here. I want to start learning about this so I can help the narrative because I've never been in something before where my parents didn't potentially have an answer for, right? So I didn't do good in my grades, my parents will say, study more. If I don't feel, I wake up and I'm groggy, my parents will say, go to sleep earlier. This virus comes and I'm told, stay in the house and we don't know when you can go outside again and see my friends. Well, hopefully that potential will spawn a lot of younger people to say, well, I completely don't understand that. And I'm so curious. I want to find out more. And what's the steps to do that?
Absolutely. It's it was being reactive, right? As opposed to proactiveness. What this country and the world needs is the E. I always call it the E. Is that the E stands for entrepreneurship, but E also stands for 2.718. It's a number that is used in calculus. It can't be explained. So calculus is what helps explain why the derivative of the function y equals e to the x is also y prime is y prime is also e to the x. Why is that? You can't explain it using algebra. You can't explain it using trigonometry because the derivative of sine is cosine. The derivative of y equals x squared, which is a powerful function, but it's 2x. Everything becomes changed when you look at the rate of change of something, except that function, which is y equals e to the x. So what is y equals e to the x? Why is e a constant 2.718? And there's many numbers after that. Why is that? It's because that will lead you, and most kids that learn about calculus don't see this. And I missed it when I was taught calculus in high school because I only went to high school once. But because I wanted to build a homeschool for my kids and I wanted to prevent this risk factor way before this COVID-19, it was in 2017 I decided to go on that path, the TED Talk, Inventing Happiness. I share it. I say, all right, world, I'm going to go and do this now. And people said, that's career suicide. But at the same time, it was knowing that something is going to happen. How do I change this? How do I build a real estate model into this? Why is E so important? Is because that is compound interest. The very E I'm talking about is compound interest. But they never say compound interest is E when you learn it in calculus. Otherwise, you'd be like, oh, wow, that's incredible. It's the only function that continues to exponentially grow post looking at the rate of change. The rate of change is also growing equally as fast. And there's just nothing like that. So if you didn't touch the money in your real estate and you let it compound, it would compound faster and faster. So don't buy real estate for your personal income, right? Because then you're going to put your income at risk. Buy real estate as an asset, but at the same time, let it compound so you can grow it. Now, of course, there's other secrets in real estate. I'm by no means an expert because I've only been doing this for a year and maybe 9 to 10 months. So almost 2 years when I reached the 8 figures. So it was actually the rate of increase that was pretty dramatic. Now, partially I took my invention finance into this, right? So inventions helped me get to a certain level, but then particularly it was finding assets that was not modeling the E. And it was flawed in the sense that it was mismanaged. So there was a deal out there, it was mismanaged. And the only real estate I was willing to look at was things that were, now there's a name for it, and we'll go into the name at the end. But initially, I only wanted grocery stores and drugstores. I only wanted that. And realtors that brought me there would say, why don't you look at residential? Why don't you look at, and I put it through my own filter, is I only want essential businesses. Right? If I'm going to go and pour the time into the real estate, then I'm going to do that. Now, why didn't I take the real estate income as personal income? Well, I'm not supposed to be doing that because I'm supposed to be modeling that E. So in order to model the E, I'm going to leave it in as a company, build it up, and it shot to 8 figures pretty quickly. Also, the banks that looked at it said, you're very bankable. You don't even use that income. Right. So think about from their perspective as a lender, they're going to think, wow, this guy doesn't touch his, I wasn't thinking so much from their perspective, but when it came to the borrowing and they were to sell the note, they didn't sell the note. And subsequently, the bank got acquired. And when they got acquired by a big bank, now suddenly the line of credit became massive. So it went from 10, the 8 figures of real estate to a point where they said, we can actually let you borrow up to 9 figures, approaching 10 figures, to if you find any asset that's actually producing yield. Now, the compound interest that when I left it in and I looked at it and after we tweaked it, it was producing 17% cash on cash. It's hard to beat. And even in COVID-19, same thing, 17% cash on cash. So if you just do a few of these, right, you just have to, number one, don't pick things that blow up, right? And the other one is you're leveraging, so you're able to borrow, but you're being a steward because without me doing this, how does the bank make money? Right? The bank doesn't make money with depositors. The bank needs entrepreneurs, that E out there, but the entrepreneurs have to be willing to help each other. Like I'm very willing to help others because as the E becomes stronger, we have a better environment to actually be in. You're in Westfield, I'm over here in the Short Hills area. And we need that E because what happens is it's better company, right? So, when you look at the other E that I focus on is education, it's no good staying with me. I've got to find a way to inspire the next generation. So the only way to do it isn't telling them to work harder or study or to do things that you won't do. That's why I became the tutor I am, because my purpose wasn't to tutor other kids and make an income. My purpose was to inspire my own daughters that sees their dad not collecting monies from real estate. That's not a good image, right? So the image I want to project to them, without telling them anything, is that I'm constantly doing biology, chemistry, physics, calculus, working with other kids, and education is really important because that's what puts the food on the table. So by giving them that mindset when they're 2 years old, 3 years old, they're constantly learning. They learn on their own because they need to make the most use of every day so that they can become an expert. My 5-year-old picked up a piano and played with both hands, right? Starts playing with both hands, not because I found a tutor for her. I found a tutor for my wife so that she plays, to get her back in shape with the piano. But it attracted one daughter. It didn't attract the other one. Once the first daughter was attracted to it, the other one became more curious about it, but it's not her liking. That's okay, right? You have to create this environment. Not everyone's going to like the same thing. So it is that inspiration that is, not everyone's going to be proactive. That's why we have the way the world is. But you have to also think, how do you let their reactions not be as painfully negative, right? How do you do that? How do you create an environment where they become stimulated? So homeschooling became a driving force, not because we couldn't afford school, not because I wanted to sink the time in. It wasn't because of any of those reasons. It was, I need to learn to show them how to be independent, how to function on every day and become purposeful. And the beginning building blocks is that, and then together we'll discover it, because I don't know the answer. I fixed it for myself. It's some kind of foggy kind of approach, but if it's going to become a lesson plan, or if it's going to become a formula, well, it has to be tested amongst not just 1 or 10 or 50 individuals. It has to be worked on hundreds of thousands. So the most inspirational thing for other families' kids when they work with me, now that's hard, right? Because they're not my kid. How did I end up inspiring them? The statistics became this. I've tutored 490 kids now in 2 years. And of the 490, 60% of those kids ranked in the top 1% in the country, not top 99%. So they're the top 1%, 99 percentile. How is that possible? They didn't start that way. Some of them started with 50 percentile. And how do they rank up? They had to move 1 million spots. So some kid moves up 1 million spots. What did you do to them? So was it just doing the content? Content was important, but it was them knowing that, hey, when I'm not tutoring you, I'm also looking at the real estate, but I'm not sinking all of my time in there. And, oh, Doc, why did you do the real estate? Because if I don't, there are certain shiny object risk factors out there, including nobody else but myself, is that I might not be able to be flying that much on the plane once I hit 60. There's something called deep vein thrombosis, DVTs. So if you get up there in age, you could be setting yourself up for blood clots, leg clots, if you fly that often. So there are some things that just happen. We don't have all the time in the world to keep making those mistakes. We have to optimize our life. And some people climb a mountain, they set their goals and they've achieved it. Then they suddenly stop. They say like, oh, I've done everything.
Yeah.
If you climb a mountain and you succeed, find another mountain. Find a different one. Don't find a taller one. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Olympians set everything with their goal in mind of the gold medal, and it's that point. Their whole life has been built up to that gold medal, and then after that fact, they have to make that choice, right? Because now that pinnacle moment has either happened or not. Where do they go from here? And that's why you could see a lot. Once they hit that, as pro athletes, the same thing is that their identity was so built into that. And with us on a smaller level, on many different facets, our identity gets built into something that we have to make change. And I just love what you're doing with kids. We've talked about homeschooling and having the ability to do that over the last couple of months and just be able to change a narrative. And it's passing on good habits and good practices to the kids, but really just letting them make the choice. My parents let me make choices. They didn't say you need to do this. And I think many times parents say the kids need to do this. They need to make these choices, and it limits the kids, right? Because they feel compelled to follow direction or follow what their parents say, or go completely the opposite. And then they're not making rational decision on what's engaging, right? So like the piano example, one daughter loved it. The other one, maybe it will come down the pipeline, but right now it's just not her thing. Okay, no problem, and
right.
maybe she likes the saxophone. I don't know, but maybe we're not even, maybe she likes something else completely. But the more we can engage kids to let them be proactive in their decision making. I mean, that's the future right there, and that definitely is. And you know, my kids are getting to that stage where they're asking a lot of questions. And what's fun for me is that you get to a point where you're trying to now make sure you're answering in a way that it makes sense, right? Because you can give the answer that's not going to make sense to them at all. But can I speak to the point where it's a clear, concise answer that you know, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old can get the value of it, and then now use it to now ask a better question.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So the challenges of life, you know, it's it's taking that into perspective and knowing what to do. It's you know, when we have certain risk factors that are out there, the 100-year flood, right? You know, you got those kinds of, and I use it very broadly, those kinds of conditions. You know, we don't need to chop every tree down to start having issues. What happens when the balance of having the tree that takes in the carbon dioxide, that one tree that is at that tipping point, and now you chop it down and suddenly you draw a cascade of events? What do? Well, life is actually short and riskier than one would imagine. Doing nothing actually it creates risk.
You know, and I just listened to 100-year flood that you said, and that's another thing. You know, by 2100, we could have a part of the shoreline that recedes, and we think about 2-3% of the shoreline receding over sea levels rising. What does that do? Like all of our major cities that are aligned right there, what does that do to New York City? So not only are we going to have less room for people, more people, and we're going to have less really massive land. What does that do? And so doing nothing right now, like you said, that's the choice a lot of people are making right now in a time like this, but that's the last thing we can ever do. Right. So, there's action and there's inaction. And we know, for one thing, the action might not provide the right result, but we know definitely inaction is going to provide no results. That's and that right. goes that course that you move forward. So, well, yeah. Dr. Chiu, we're coming up on time, man. I could probably do this for a couple hours here. So I'm going to love to have you back, of course.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for your perspective. I always appreciate it. There's a lot of places I can recommend for people to learn more. Is there a place that you would prefer that people check out to learn more about what you're doing, what you've done?
They just have to Google my name, Dr. Gordon Chiu, and it'll show up. There's several Google pages. I mean, for families that are interested in the homeschool, I have dwaprep.com. The real estate, I don't really have investors. I just deal with it myself, and I'm very private with it. But people can certainly ask me that. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. There's things I'm out there because I work with kids, so I have to be publicly present.
Yeah, and your TEDx talk on graphene, I enjoyed that. So,
thank you.
People check that out. Just search your name, TEDx Talks, and that will come up right there, or graphene TEDx Talks. That will definitely come up. So, I super appreciate you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Join us for your second cup of coffee every Monday through Friday at noon.
Live every day, bringing us our best content we've done so far. Super excited, super engaging. Bunch of great guests. We're here to answer your questions, and we so appreciate you listening. Make sure to check this out.
Can't wait to see you.